So this video will look at solar energy, and what we're going to be looking at is solar harnessing, solar energy and harnessing and use. We're going to get active or photothermal energy, passive such as solar cookers and solar furnaces, and photovoltaic cells. So for solar energy, it can be passive or active. And the term passive and active in solar thermal systems. So that's why we're talking about solar thermal systems, which is simply about heat. Refer to whether the systems rely on pumps or only thermodynamics to circulate water through systems. And in passive solar heating, the sun shines through windows and goes onto a material which will absorb and store heat. So it'll absorb heat when it's hot and then release the heat when it is cold. And then you have active solar heating, which uses a water pump. So the water can go to a place where the water is heated, and then it goes to a hot water tank where it is stored and then used when needed. So you have active solar heating and passive. These are both forms of photothermal energy, or simply heat energy. So passive heating then. The best way to take advantage of passive heating is to use materials with a high thermal mass. While sunshine can warm the air in your home, air itself has a low thermal mass. So it doesn't absorb heat that well. It will just, you can't release it later on. Some materials that can better capture heat include masonry products like ceramic tiles, stones, bricks, and concrete. These materials absorb heat readily, and once the sun sets, they radiate what they've stored. And since the sun is low in the sky during the winter, using the windows to warm your home is an effective way to reduce reliance on heating systems. And this is, of course, in temperate countries. And keeping your window coverings on southwest-facing windows open is the best way to utilize passive heat. This is, of course, in the northern hemisphere, where the south-facing window will be facing the sun. You couldn't use the north-facing window; it'd have to be on the south. But in the southern hemisphere, it'll be the opposite. So that's passive heating, and it can be used in temperate countries where you're still getting some sunlight. Then you have active heating, and this uses solar heating involves heating air, water, or creating electricity with photovoltaic panels. The panels would sit on your roof on a sunny wall, where they collect heat and generate electricity to run a heat pump or power the blower fan or gas furnace. So to provide heat, which then carries out the heat energy is then used. Air collectors work the same way as your car does when you leave it in the sun with the windows closed. The trapped air gets hot and the collector either blows the air indoors with an inline fan or uses the heat connected properties to enter your home. Hydronic systems contain liquid inside an enclosed panel, absorbing solar heat and either sending it through radiant energy systems or a heat exchanger. So these are different forms of solar cookers. And the sunlight from the sun, of course, is reflected onto the thing, which will, the pan or so on, which will then cook the food. So, of course, this material is highly reflective. And perhaps the most effective way is to have a parabolic cooker, because all of these lines will form the focus of the parabola. And you can use a solar box cooker. So that's an example of a solar box cooker. That's also an example of a solar box cooker. That's a parabolic one, as that's a box one. And that was, what was it? The solar panel cooker. So you have all three types. That's also a solar panel cooker. So advantages and disadvantages of a solar cooker. They do not require fuel, which is a really big advantage. We don't need to either have cooking gas or even things like wood or charcoal and all things. So solar cookers can be used to boil water and then can be used inside. And concentrator cookers are useful when there are lots of meals to be prepared at the same time. But the disadvantage is they do not work at night. And concentrator type cookers need to follow the sun. So as the sun moves during the day, you need to move your cooker. Some require constant attendance while cooking, and most require level land. And most are too tall for women who like to cook sitting. It seems a bit sexist. But yeah, so they might be too tall for people who want to sit. Notice this thing seems to assume that it's the women who will be doing the cooking, which is not necessarily true. Advantages of solar cookers. They're used in places where there's no electricity and people who cannot buy the electrical cookers to prepare daily food. And the type of solar cooker is used in many developed countries to conserve energy as well as cook their food. And they can also be used in developing countries where they don't have access to electricity. Solar cookers help in protecting forests and it doesn't cause any pollution into the environment. That's important. These cookers don't need electricity for its working, and it decreases global warming costs. And solar cookers don't produce smoke when cooking food. Disadvantages. These cookers are only used in the daytime and cannot be used on cloudy days. They cannot maintain heat for long periods of time. And the device is not built properly, may not work properly and cause burns. When the UV lights, when the UV rays or sunlight get reflected in your eyes, your eyesight can be destroyed. So you've got to be very careful when using solar cookers, because it might harm your eyesight, and it takes more time to cook. Then you have photovoltaic systems. They're also easy to maintain once installed, and they reduce the consumption of fossil fuels. It's an advantage. Currently, electricity from PV systems is more expensive than electricity produced from fossil fuels or nuclear power plants. That's because of the expense of the solar panels and so on. But in a country such as Jamaica, where the dollar is constantly devaluing all the time, it ends up being cheaper. And it reduces the production of greenhouse gases, but it's expensive to buy. It reduces the production of various pollutants, but it requires engineering expertise to design and install. It's good for remote applications such as satellites, rural hospital equipment in developing countries, telecommunication, etc. The production of PV systems from single silicon crystals is technically challenging and energy and time consuming. But of course, price of PV systems is going down because technology is improving. It reduces the loss of electricity due to power line resistance because it can be sited where the electricity is used. So people can have photovoltaic systems have their own photovoltaic systems. So there's no energy loss due to distribution. And sunlight is not constant, so must get electricity from other sources at night. So when you have photovoltaic systems, you need to have batteries. And reduces water consumed in electrical generation processes, displacing electrical demand. Where the sunlight is diffuse, PV systems take much space to produce enough electricity to meet our current needs. It does not contribute to thermal pollution of waterways. There's no hidden costs. It can provide energy independence. I say, if people could get enough panels, they wouldn't need to depend on the power companies. And PVC cells last 30 years, which is a fairly long time, and it's a renewable energy source. So there are lots of advantages. And this is what a photovoltaic system looks like. You need solar panels, and these will go to charge up batteries, which isn't shown here. And then from batteries to an inverter, which converts DC to AC. And then it then goes to your home appliances. And in some countries, you can produce extra, which then can be sold to the grid. So solar panels absorb sunlight and convert it into a direct current electricity. And batteries are storage devices, and they store electricity that can be used during the night. And inverters, these convert DC into AC, and this is necessary because most devices run on AC. So, as I said, a PV array arrays sunlight into direct current. A charge controller protects the battery from overcharging. So on your battery, you're going to have a charge controller, which prevents them from overcharging. Then the battery bank stores the energy produced by the PV array. And then an inverter converts DC to an alternating current. And inverters are also fairly expensive. And the power meter measures how much electricity you use for your home and how much you send to the grid. And this is an example of a solar power station. In the world, we're getting more and more solar power stations. They require a large amount of land and basically are often grown in deserts, placed in deserts where there's not much growing. But of course, people can have them in their homes, on their roofs, and so on. So this is a solar power station. We have a PV array. You can go to an inverter charge controller and a battery bank which stores energy, which then goes to the grid, and of course to a transformer, which increases the voltage. So up transformers are needed to increase voltage, so less electricity is lost during transmission. Basically, the higher the voltage, the less electricity loss you find. And here are examples of the largest power stations in the world. The largest is in India. It has a megawatt capacity of 2,700. Then you have the next one in China. It has a capacity of 2,400. And then the next one in China. And then the next one in Egypt. This list would go on, but just an idea of where solar power stations are located. And of course, it is one in the US, and there are some in developed countries. And so that basically just finishes the discussion, so we can stop at this point in time.